Welcome everyone to our inaugural Fireflies of Arden project. I'm really excited that you're here and hanging out. It's perfect time of year. I know I've been seeing some fireflies out and about this week, so it's right on time. So my name is Carrie Wickstead. I'm over in section 4 off of Plum Creek. If you ever drove by and saw a random Sasquatch in the tree and seen a yard full of plants, that is my little area. And I've been here, gosh, a little over 10 years now. So pretty amazing to be in this neighborhood and part of Arden. And with me today is also Marjorie, who is the brainchild of this whole project. She was the one who approached Kim Franklin and said, hey, I want to do a Fireflies project, and got me roped in. So really glad to have this experience and to be able to provide it to the community. And it's going to be one big learning experience for all of us, I think. So this is going to be our first year, but we're hoping maybe that we can continue this into the future. And we have a small group, so feel free to ask questions along the way. You can either unmute yourself and ask questions, write them in the chat, or you can use the little raise hand function and all of that. So this is all about learning tonight. So to start off, what the heck is a firefly? We also call them lightning bugs, and some people call them glowworms too. So they're all a group of soft-bodied beetles in this family called Lampyridae. And so they go by lots of different names, and I found that even some of them have some pretty fun common names as well. And what you might not realize is that fireflies are actually really important predators in our ecosystems, particularly for things like snails and slugs. Their juvenile phase is basically a voracious predator, and some of the adults also are big time predators, and some adults are also pollinators. Some don't feed at all, so they've got a really interesting life cycle, and it's been fun kind of diving into this group of critters because they've been outside my area of expertise for quite some time. So you might be surprised to know that the majority of the firefly's life cycle is actually underground, and they can spend up to 2 years underground. So what we see in terms of the adults flying about and flashing and all of that is usually a very small portion of their life cycle. So this time of year, our eastern fireflies are out breeding and all of that, and they'll soon be laying eggs down in the soil. And those eggs are going to hatch, develop into those carnivorous larvae, some of which are going to spend their entire time underground. And then others that are going to kind of vacillate between above ground and underground in terms of eating things. Eventually, those larvae are going to go through a metamorphic process known as pupation. So they will become pupa, and that's kind of like a static phase where they're in their little pupal case. If you're familiar with things like butterflies, the pupal stage is the chrysalis stage, where they kind of hang there, become the jelly-like goo, and then eventually emerge as butterflies. But in this case, our buddies are going to emerge as fireflies. And just to show you some actual pictures of what these juveniles look like, they're not what I expected when I first started learning about fireflies. And actually, it was just recently that I found one of the treetop flashers in my yard, and I was like, what the heck is this beetle? I knew it was a beetle larvae, but I didn't realize that this thing turns into a firefly. So they've got these long bodies that are kind of plated with armor. In one site, Silent Fireflies described it as the gluttony and growth phase because essentially they're out eating all the things. So they've got these armored bodies that help protect them, and they actually have these really strong jaws that they're equipped with, and they have saliva that is a neurotoxin. So whatever they attack, they inject or they bite it, and their saliva is mixed with that neurotoxin that immobilizes its prey and also helps liquefy it to help them consume it. So that's why they're so good at eating the snails and the slugs and sometimes each other out and about. So again, for some species, this stage is almost entirely underground. but for others, you will see them out and about. And some of them, at this stage will also have kind of that bioluminescence where they will be glowing. So occasionally you will see them flashing in the night, and it might be these larvae that you're seeing. So a few other fun facts about our fireflies. I was surprised to know that they have the most efficient light mechanism in the world, and meaning that they produce little to no waste in the process. When you think about incandescent bulbs, like our light bulbs and stuff like that, only about 10% of the energy is actually used as light. The rest is heat that's discarded in that process of creating the light. Whereas with fireflies, they're almost 100% efficient. And they're basically like little butt chemists because all of this is happening in the back end of their bodies. So they have these little light producing organs, and their head sends a signal down to their butts in their abdomens, and it creates this chemical reaction where these things called luciferins, luciferase enzymes, and oxygen all mix together to produce that light that we see. And then also, some of those things are additionally used to create toxicity in these lightning bugs. And so that's one way to advertise to say that you really don't want to eat me. And some of the research with the evolution of fireflies has shown that, or at least seems to indicate that fireflies developed this flashing mechanism to actually advertise to potential predators that you don't want to eat me. I don't taste very good. So now it's essentially just a sex show that they're doing out there. They're using those flashing lights to advertise to one another. The other thing about this light, which I think is pretty fascinating, is that we have actually harnessed some of those luciferins and luciferase enzymes to use for all sorts of different things in the medical and the scientific world. And one of the most interesting things that I've found is that they use it sometimes, or they used to use it a lot for food safety, because those enzymes can actually fluoresce whenever there's essentially like bacteria like E. coli and stuff like that in food. And so at one time, fireflies were harvested for those enzymes and those chemicals to use it in food safety and essentially to see if food was okay to sell to people and all of that. Now they've created a lot of those chemicals synthetically, so we don't do as much firefly harvesting, but apparently it still happens in some areas. In terms of fireflies, in some species, the eggs, larvae, and adults all can glow. Sometimes it's just one stage, like just the egg stage or the adult stage, and sometimes it's none of the stages. So some of our daytime flyers actually do not have that glowing phase, but they're still toxic to predators. And because they're top level predators, sometimes it's a firefly eat firefly world out there. So there is some cannibalism that occurs both within an individual species and interspecies cannibalism. And there's some femme fatales out there that the females sneakily use the flash patterns of other species to kind of attract those unsuspecting males in to mate with them. And in turn, they meet with the jaws of that female on the ground, and she eats them, consumes their light organs and all of that, and uses that for her own chemicals. So pretty wild thing that happens. And this is like something that happens with the some of the species that we have in our area. So you might have some femme fatales in your own yard as well. In the Great Smoky Mountains, there's also these really fascinating species, the synchronous fireflies, which we don't have here in Maryland, but they're in some of the areas in the Great Smoky Mountains and then in other places around the world. And essentially, all of these fireflies sync up and flash at the same time. And in places like Tennessee, it's an amazing light show, and it's become so popular that there's ecotourism that's popped up around it. I was actually looking online. You have to get permits and special times to go out and see some of this. For a long time, it was just well known from the people in Tennessee and some of those rural areas that this was just their fun thing to do in June and July, is see all the fireflies, and now the word has gotten out. So it's really unique phenomena that happens. Unfortunately, our fireflies, like a lot of insects all around, are declining. And one thing that is really concerning about fireflies is if you look at this number right here, over half the species that we know about here in the United States and Canada are data deficient. Essentially, we do not have good information on fireflies. And part of that is just because insects are a relatively understudied group of animals, and fireflies were never that important in the overall scheme of things until we started noticing some major declines in all of that. So when you look at the numbers or the reasons for those declines, it's the same reasons for many other species, with that habitat loss and degradation kind of coming out as number one. But one of the cool things about fireflies and a lot of our insect species is because they're so small and their habitat needs are a little broader, that we can actually help them really well in our backyards, especially if we think about connecting our backyards to each other's backyards and thinking of it from a community perspective, which is kind of what this project is all about. So in Maryland, we have over 30 species of lampirid beetles, or, in this firefly group. And it includes those that glow and those that don't. And they're active at different times of the year. So some of them are active in the winter, some of them are active in the spring, and then we have obviously our summer fireflies. And I'm going to go through just a couple of the species that we are likely to see in the neighborhood. And so you have a little bit better idea of what we have around. But before I do, I just wanted to go over just a couple things with Firefly ID. We're not going to get heavily into Firefly identification. I was really surprised when I started going through this, essentially how difficult it is to identify fireflies. And for some of them, yeah, you got to flip them over and look at their naughty bits under a microscope to really get to that ID, which we're not going to get into this year, but maybe in the future we can partner up and do some more intense identifications. But just a couple things to pay attention to with fireflies. They are beetles, and so beetles have these specialized like wing casings over top their softer wings. And so those are called the elytra, and on this you can see it's called electron, which are like plural of elytra. But looking at the elytra patterns sometimes can be an ID character. If you can see right here, this one has this light border, which is a characteristic of the eastern firefly, which I'll talk about in a second. So this is their wing cases, and then they have this special, it's called a pronotal or pronotum. Essentially, it's a head shield. And so their heads are actually under that shield, and occasionally they'll flip their heads out, but usually they hide their heads under that pronotum. And that's one of the ways to tell fireflies from some of the look-alike species like the soldier beetles, which I'll show you in a little bit, because there are things that like to look like fireflies because they like to pose as being essentially, toxic and predatory and all of that. It gives them a little leg up with the competition out there. You can't see it very well, but sometimes the shape of the antenna can also matter for some of these fireflies. So if you're taking pictures of a firefly, if you can get a picture of the top and have that elytra and then also the antenna and pronotum in focus, that's going to be really, really great. And another thing is also if you can flip them over, and sometimes it's easier if you put them in like a little plastic baggie to secure them, and you could take photos through a plastic baggie and flip them over. And this is helpful because some species you've got to look at these light organs, and some of them also you can tell the differences between males and females by looking at the light organs. Essentially, the males are going to have bigger light organs than the females, just because they're doing a lot more of that advertising. All right, so this is just a handy dandy chart of some of the common flash patterns that you're going to see. And the most common flash pattern that I'm seeing right now, and the one you'll probably see, is this Photinus pyralis, which is the eastern firefly. They're also known as the Big Dipper, and it's because they have this kind of like J-shaped pattern. When they flash, it looks like, they dip. And so you see it move instead of just a flash out in the dark, you see it moving. And they do this every 6 seconds. So if you're doing ID, it's good to count the amount of time in between flashes, as you can see here on the chart. Some of them are flashing every 3 seconds. Some of them are doing a double flash and waiting several more seconds to do that double flash. So if you're doing a video, if you can get that video and that timing between the flash, that's really going to help with kind of distinguishing some of these different species. So we have the possibility of seeing all of these Photinus species here in Maryland, but we have really little documentation of fireflies in Maryland. So again, the most common one we're going to see is this Photinus pyralis, but this one, the consanguineus, is also in the area. So that double flash and then a couple more seconds and another double flash is something to pay attention to. The last thing that I'm going to say about this slide is for the flash patterns of the males, because the males are the ones floating around in advertising. The ones that are going to be on the ground or on vegetation sitting there and flashing, those are the females. So they're going to sometimes have different flash patterns, but usually when you look at the flash patterns, it's the males because they're the ones doing the most advertising out there. And this one that has an X, this is that synchronous firefly, which is definitely not in the area. So as I keep mentioning, the most common species that we have, and the one that is out right now and that you're going to see in Arden right now, is this eastern firefly species, the Photinus pyralis. So it's the most common this time of year, like June and July is the peak season for it. It's also known as the Big Dipper or the J-stroke. It's also one of our largest fireflies. It can get up to almost 3/4 of an inch in length. So they have that long J-shaped flash every 5 to 7 seconds, but it's typically like a 6-second pattern there. So this is a picture from my friend Tyler here, and if you look at the elytra, you will see that light border that kind of goes all around the elytra. So if you see a big firefly with that light border all around the elytra, it's very likely this eastern firefly species. So this is our most common here in Anne Arundel County and also in the state and throughout much of the eastern United States. This is the most common firefly you're going to run into. We also have this black firefly, and I'm pretty sure I saw one this afternoon when I did my hike around the neighborhood. And they're a daytime flyer, so they actually have no flash at all. You will see them out and about. And if you look at the elytra here, you will notice it does not have any of that light border like we saw on that previous slide. So these are going to be active during the day. They're typically active starting late morning and a little bit later in the afternoon. And these are the second most common firefly that you're going to see around. And we're kind of getting towards the end of their activity season, but they're out and about this time of year as well. And it looks like Serenella has been seeing those at the center. She's over in Prince George's County, right on the DC border. So this is another species that you'll see throughout the state. They also have these really tiled antennae, so you can see those thick tiled antennae there. Moving along to another species that's common in the neighborhood, you might see this, but it's much more common to see this actually in January through March, and this is the winter firefly species. So they're another daytime active firefly, so they have no flash pattern. And you usually, when I see them out in the woods, and you'll see them on the bark of trees in January, February, March, and all of that. So if you look at the pronotum there, they have this very light yellow and pink. It almost looks like parentheses around that. They don't have any of that light border that you would see on that eastern firefly, but they also are not as dark as that dark firefly and all of that. So this is a species that we might see this time of year. Looking for that pronotum pattern is going to be helpful distinguishing it between the dark firefly, which I'll um, go back one slide. See how dark this guy is, and it doesn't have that light pink. It's more of an orangey and a red on the head. So this is a lot lighter pattern for this winter firefly. And this is another species that isn't really going to be active. I think its highest activity levels are typically around March in our area. Another one that is common in the springtime, and it's kind of its end of season is happening now, is this spring treetop flasher. And this is the one that I found some of the larvae in my yard this past spring. So they're much more common in April to May. In that pronotum, if you look right there, there's this kind of like ridge there. And so the pronotum on this group, the Pyractominas, is going to have more of a ridge instead of a groove, and so it's a lot more pronounced on this. This could get confused with the eastern firefly, that one that I showed you earlier, because it does have those light borders around the elytra. So, taking pictures, if you can take a picture and get ahead of that pronotum, that's going to be helpful. They also are going to have different flash patterns. These are going to be flashing in the spring, and it's a single flash every 2 to 3 seconds. So you're not going to see that flash and that J kind of thing that they're doing. They're doing a flash, flash, flash. And their flash frequency is actually dependent on the temperature, which makes sense. So it's every 2 to 3 seconds and 60 to 69 degrees. But if we get some of those more May days, which we have had this last couple years, you will see those flash patterns, essentially increase. So it'll be closer to the 2 seconds, every 2 seconds for those flash patterns and everything. So as I alluded to earlier, there are some species out there that try to pass themselves off as fireflies, and that's just because the fireflies are toxic and predatory. So they're kind of like the yellow jackets of the wasp world. There are a lot of things that like to look like yellow jackets because nobody wants to mess with them. And that's what the soldier beetles try to do, is they try to look like the fireflies because most other insects don't want to mess with the fireflies. One of the biggest things to look for, because some of them, like this one right here, you can see it has a little bit of that patterning, and to the untrained eye, it can really look like a firefly. But if you notice, that head is out, so that head is not under that shield, that pronotum there. So that's something that's you have to look for. So this is a firefly here on the left. You can see that pronotum. The head is promptly hidden under that pronotum. And then on this one on the right, you see that soldier beetle where that head is out. So those pronotums, some of the soldier beetles can be really, really convincing too. And I saw some over at Adkins Arboretum when we were doing a bio blitz a couple weeks ago with Saranella. I was like, oh, look at all these fireflies. And then I went back on iNaturalist, which is what we'll be using, and promptly learned that I was looking at soldier beetle fake outs. So yeah. Okay. Any questions before I jump into our project and iNaturalist?
I have one, Carrie. Does the female of the spring treetop firefly stay close to the ground?
I believe it's actually closer, like higher up in the trees. So I think the females you're going to see those flashes of lights up in the trees for those treetop flashers. So good question.
Thank you.
And the larvae for those also will do flash patterns as well. So any other questions? All right. Well, feel free to hop in with any questions along the way. So I'm going to share a link to our site, but starting on Saturday, we're going to kick off our first Fireflies of Arden project. And as I said at the beginning, this is our first year trying this out, so we might hit some bumps along the way, but we're all learning together. So we're going to run it for about a month, and it's going to be a project on this resource called iNaturalist, which I'll go into in a second. But kind of our goals are to document what we have here in Arden, learn together, and also think about ways that we can make Arden more wildlife friendly, for our fireflies and all the many other species that we have here in the neighborhood. And so everyone who participates, you're going to get one of these fancy stickers that I need to mail out. So if you haven't signed up on the Jot form yet, which is linked on the website, please sign up and you'll get your own fancy firefly stickers so you can kind of show off for everyone. All right. How many folks have used iNaturalist before in this group? I see Kim. Marjorie is learning.
I downloaded it, but I haven't used it yet.
Okay, awesome. Well, for those of you who haven't used it, it's going to open a whole new world for you. So if it's kind of like Pokemon for wildlife and nature, and it can be quite addicting. And what's really really cool is it's an excellent resource for researchers and scientists to gather data and information about plants and wildlife because there are a lot more people like you all out there than folks doing that research and everything. So it's a free app. You can get it on your phone, like on a iPhone or an Android phone. But also, when you sign up for an account, you can also access the web version as well. So if you don't want to download the app, then you can just use it online. And for those of you who have children under 13 and they're not allowed to have an account because of the children's online privacy and all of that, there is another version, a lighter version called Seek. But this is a great project. It is a community science platform. It's open to all, and it includes observational data and all sorts of stuff. And one of the really, really cool things about iNaturalist here in Maryland is that we have this amazing project called the Maryland Biodiversity Project, which recently celebrated 10 years. And they pull any of the research grade observations from iNaturalist into Maryland Biodiversity Project. And that data is really, really helpful for folks learning and knowing more about what is found all across Maryland. And I used to work at the Department of Natural Resources for many years, and Maryland Biodiversity Project has been an amazing, amazing resource for learning more about our plants and wildlife and getting those observations. But observations can include photos, videos, audio files, all of the above, and you can use it for anything. So we're going to be focusing on fireflies for this project, but you can use it for a lot more than just fireflies. You can take pictures of animals, you can take pictures of plants, you can take pictures of poop. And I might even be out there helping you to identify the piles of poop because that's one of my weird specialties is identifying scat of wildlife. But tracks, bones, they're really, really expanding. Saranella is a mycologist. She studies fungi. So she might be, you see fungi, you put it up on iNaturalist, she might be the person identifying it for you. So essentially what you do is you sign up for this account and you make observations. So in the app, to make an observation, you just hit this green plus sign and it's going to ask you, what kind of photos or videos that you want to upload, or if you want to take a photo in that moment. And so then you'll upload those photos, videos, audio files, or as I said, you can take it in the moment, and you can use multiple files. And I highly suggest, especially with insects and fungi and plants, taking a couple photos of different angles and all of that, because that ultimately is going to help with identification. And so you add your photos, and then the really cool part is you click this "What did you see" function. And what it does is it uses AI to help determine what you're looking at. And I've been with iNaturalist since it started, and at first I was really skeptical because I'm a plant person, and it would be like way off base with those plants. But the AI has really, really increased, really good, and it's really, really awesome at identifying a lot of things. It still has some work to do with the little things like some of the insects and the fungi and all of that, but it has come a long way. And you can use it internationally. Like I've traveled to Costa Rica and Japan, and I've used iNaturalist to help me learn some of the stuff that I'm looking at internationally. So it's not just for Arden or for Maryland, it's worldwide, and all of that. So you'll click that little "What did you see" button. You can also type in what you think you saw. So I do this a lot of times because I know I can identify a lot of the things. So I will type in that, and so it'll pull that ID up. And then you can add notes. Notes are really helpful for insects. So for fireflies, if you're just taking a photo of the firefly but you saw it flashing, if you could write, flashes every 6 seconds or double flash every 2 to 3 seconds in that note section, that's going to be helpful for identifying species. If I'm looking at something like a caterpillar that is eating a plant, if you can write down like, oh, this is on an oak tree, that'll help when somebody's coming in and identifying it because there are a lot of specialists out there. The iNaturalist program, as long as you have your location settings turned on, it is going to automatically pull in the date, the time that you saw it, and the location. And you don't have to, do these observations as soon as you're outside, right? So you can take photos and then come back when you have service and upload those observations. All that data is saved with those photos. It's in the background data called XF data. And then you can choose your geoprivacy settings. This is important because some species are unfortunately exploited. So I work with turtles, like box turtles and things like that across North America, and I work on the illegal trade that is happening with our box turtles. So if you're uploading pictures of turtles, we always suggest to obscure your geoprivacy because people who poach turtles actually are using social platforms like iNaturalist to find those locations and target those species. If you're doing this in the neighborhood, you might also want to obscure your settings because you don't want people to know where your house is. And that's totally okay. If you go into iNaturalist and look at the map in Arden, you will see a giant blob of sightings, and that's my backyard. So I'm easily identifiable in where I live on iNaturalist. But it's up to you. If you obscure that geoprivacy, you can still see the locations and researchers can still see the locations, but the general public cannot see those locations. So if you go into the general map and look around you, those data points are going to be obscured. So people don't know where you live or where you might have seen this orchid or turtle or other exploited species. For this project, we are going to have a project that is automatically going to pull in any sightings in the firefly family, that Lampyridae. You take any pictures within Anne Arundel County that might be in Lampyridae, it is automatically going to pull it into the Fireflies project. And we have it for all of Anne Arundel County just because I did not have the borders of Arden in like a file that I could upload into iNaturalist. So you can encourage your friends outside of Arden to also upload their Firefly settings and all of that. Occasionally there are also projects like, as I said earlier, Saranella and I just did a BioBlitz, and so we worked on a project, and so that was, all of our observations for that BioBlitz were going into that project. And sometimes you have to join those projects as well. So, all right. So just some tips and tricks. Take photos from multiple angles. Use something for size reference. So if you can have your ruler, a coin, your hand, you will see my hand in a lot of the photos there. And my sparkly nails, that's usually a good indicator of sizes, right? If you can use like a little magnifying glass and look at some of the finer details and then incorporate that into the notes, that's helpful. And you know, using things like your hand. So if you're taking pictures of really, really little things, I usually put my hand behind it, and then you can focus, hit that focus button on your phone, and it'll focus on your hand, and then it'll help you focus on whatever insect or plant or something like that there in front of you. But try to take a couple photos. If you can take videos of these fireflies, that also is going to be helpful for identification. And then again, getting close, thinking about putting some of these fireflies in plastic baggies so you can get the top and the bottom photos. That's going to be really, really helpful. And adding information about the habitat and those time flash patterns, if you can add those as notes, that's also going to be good. And I am going to stop sharing really quick. And I'm going to switch my video just to show you how to do iNaturalist really, really quick on my phone. Got to change up my settings really quick. Mirror video. Spotlight for everyone. All right. So you can see my iNaturalist account right here. And to upload a photo, I'm going to hit that little plus sign. So you can, oh, it's hard to see, but you can see no media, take a photo, choose image, record sound, or choose sound. So this is where you can take photos that you've already taken, or you can take them in the moment. So I am going to choose an image, and I'm going to tell it that I want to choose it from my gallery, because I just went out right before this. And these are actually some pictures of a bumblebee that I took. So I'm going to select multiple pictures. And I'm going to go up here and hit done. You can add up to 500 photos per observation. You don't need 500 photos. So I've just added all those photos. You can see it automatically pulled in the location and the time. So it's 6:05 tonight, right before. And then I'm going to click this magic button is what did you see? And this is where that AI magic happens. And it's going to tell me, you know, if it knows for sure, it will tell me. But bees can be difficult because you've got to look at different parts of the bees and all of that. So for sure, it is telling me it is a bumblebee. Okay, so it is definitely in that genus Bombus. But it could be these different types of bumblebees. And what's nice is it'll tell me it's visually similar and expected nearby. So that AI actually looks at what you expect to see nearby. You can actually click on the species. So this is our common eastern bumblebee. You can look at different pictures. It will tell you some natural history information about them. It will show you where they've been seen. And it even gives you data like seasonality. So those common bumblebees are most likely going to be seen in August and September, but we're at, you know, that early stage right now. So so I can, if I go back, I can either select this common bumblebee, or if I think it's one of these other species, it is also recognizing that the bumblebee is on butterfly milkweed, which is the plant. But I'm just going to tell it that it's a bumblebee, just in general. So I'm not going to get it down to species. I can add notes like on butterfly weed or anything like that. If you're taking photos of plants in your garden, or plants or animals that might be at the zoo, it's really, really good to check this box. Okay, so we know that it is a captive or cultivated specimen and not one that is wild. Here's my Facebook notification, and then I can choose to add it to a project, like some of the projects that I've joined or some of the other ones that are out there. And so the location visibility too, I can tell it if it's open, obscured, or private. So do I want to obscure the settings so the visibility is far away from where I saw it to the public, or do I want it not viewable by the public at all? So for most people, obscured is going to work, but for some of these things, you might want to put private. So once you've got all the data in there, all you do is hit this little button, upload. It's going to upload it. And then right now it's not a confirmed because it just has my general ID right there. So the way iNaturalist works is it's a community identification. And so you put things on there and you say what you think it is, and then others will actually comment on it and then help with determining the identification for you. So I said that this is this leaf miner that's on sweet gum, and bugs agreed with me, right? But it's not. I need at least one more agreement before that is considered to be what we call a research grade observation that will get pulled into those projects. If you don't take photos for research grade observations, that's completely fine too. It's all still part of science there. So, all right. I go back to the regular camera. Oops, wrong one. Too many cameras. Okay. And any questions about iNaturalist before I continue just a little bit more about that project, about the project?
You have a question from Catherine.
Oh, okay. So Catherine is asking about the no flash characteristic because she assumes that all fireflies emit light. So yes, there are some fireflies that do not have light. So they are still in the firefly group, the Lampyridae, but they are non-flashing. So those are usually some of those daytime fireflies. So yeah. And over in Greenbelt, so I know you're over in Greenbelt, you have the only official firefly sanctuary in Maryland. So
Apparently, yes.
I'll go back to my presentation. So as I said, when you upload these observations, there's going to be community identification. And so once 2 or more users agree on the identification, it will be considered a research grade. It can take some time, especially with species that don't have a lot of identifiers out there. But eventually, if they do get to research grade, your observations might end up in Maryland Biodiversity Project, which will be really cool because it can go into all of those maps and everything. So with this project, Marjorie and I are going to do some weekly check-ins. So if you sign up on the Jot form to be part of the group, not only will you get a fancy sticker, but we're going to be monitoring the observations that are coming in and trying to highlight, what people are seeing. And, feel free to document more than just fireflies and let us know about the other cool stuff that is out there. We've got a lot in here in Arden, and even in 10 years, I've seen, all sorts of stuff. Like even recently, I had a new insect on my milkweed this week that never had before. So really, really cool. Always learning, always observing. So we'll do our weekly check-ins next Saturday. We're going to have a night hike over here in section 4, and I'll talk about that on the next slide. And whoever has the most firefly observations for our 4-week period, you are going to get a free certified firefly habitat sign from Ben Pfeiffer with Firefly Atlas, which is really nice of him to be able to offer. And thanks to Marjorie for getting that set up. And yes, Elizabeth, you can start whenever you want. You don't have to do weekly observations. We're asking people to do at least 1 observation each week, so a maximum or minimum of 4, just to kind of get you outside and looking for stuff and all of that. So as I alluded, we're going to do our night hike in section 4 this next weekend, next Saturday. We're going to start at 8:30 right before it gets a little dark. So we'll see some of those early fireflies. And joining me will be Saranella, and she is our fungi expert, and she also does a lot of night hikes. But we might be able to see, there's Saranella. We might be able to see some bioluminescent fungi, things like lichen. I took this picture. Some of our lichens that grow on the trees, they glow. Millipedes glow. Things like flying squirrels and opossums glow. So a lot of things glow under UV light. So we'll have some UV flashlights to take along with us. We'll have little glow necklaces for anybody who wants to have glow necklaces and all of that. And we'll plan to be out for about an hour, just looking around. And for those of you who haven't hiked with Serenella and I, it is going to be a very slow hike. So don't think we're going to cover a lot of mileage or anything, because we're going to see all sorts of little things out and about. So if you want to help fireflies, some of the things that will help fireflies and other wildlife in the neighborhood is reducing outdoor lighting. So our night lights at night can confuse fireflies, and they can confuse a lot of other species like birds and bats and all of that. So there are different techniques you can use, like putting things on timers and sensors, or changing the types of lights that you have out there. Certainly, reducing pesticide use will help. And if you reduce pesticide use and encourage your predators like fireflies and some of the solitary non-stinging wasps, they're going to help you with your pest control needs too. So the fireflies also spend a lot of time underground and on the ground, so leaving the leaves and logs, that's going to provide that nursery habitat. Native plants, like some of our native grasses, like switch grasses, will also provide habitat, and water features are important too, because moisture is really important for a number of our species as well. So that's it for me. I'm going to add the link into the chat one more time and open it up for questions.
Gary, I got a quick question. Obviously my daughter, she's 5. We're very excited for all this. I a little bit worry as we're doing this at night that we're being a little too, 5-year-old aggressive with the fireflies. Do you have a good way to potentially catch, and we catch them on our fingers, and sometimes there's a little movement, just to be gentle with them? Do you have any recommendations?
Yeah, excellent question. So definitely suggest handling fireflies, because I think that is like a foundational activity that a lot of us do. So getting some experience handling them, but safely, if you want to do it safely, if you can get some jars to get them in or put them in a baggie. The baggies are
Okay.
really helpful because you can actually immobilize them in the baggies without like squishing them.
I see. Okay.
So you can take some photos and see them in that. And yeah, we'll have some bug jars with us next Saturday too to show off and everything. Or if you want
Awesome.
some ideas for bug catchers, I can provide a few too. So
That'd be great. I appreciate it.
yeah.
So
Yes.
did you
I like
guys see us? Did you guys see us running around while you were while you were talking? We had
Oh no.
was it a-
Were you catching
Look at that.
fireflies?
yes, he came right up to us while we were sitting here.
Ah,
You
nice.
see that picture?
Yeah. That's
He
a
was
good photo.
He was posing. He was just hanging out on the finger. He wasn't leaving.
Yeah.
So
You see that light border on the edge there?
Yeah, you can
So
see. Yeah.
yep, that looks like our
See?
eastern firefly, and because he's got a big light
And let me
organ
see.
back, it probably is a he. So
Yeah, let me see if I can get another. There's another view of him.
nice.
Cute.
Yeah, so that'll be a great observation. You're a little early,
Yeah.
which is fine. But
Yep,
yeah,
he was hanging out.
My hand right there.
I'm gonna add a link to my favorite bug viewer for kids and adults, but it's a catcher. And so I usually, when I do outdoor programs, so that one doesn't have that. Like, was that the same one? Interesting.
Yeah, same
Oh,
one.
yes, he does have that light there. Yeah.
Mhm.
So yeah, if those were all pictures of the same one, you can upload them all to one iNaturalist observation, and that'll be really helpful. And that likely will be one of the ones that gets ID'd. Any other questions?
I just want to say
Oh.
that if Brenda's on here, Brenda Vitello, Brenda, you have an unfair advantage because you're right there next to Tufel Park. I don't know if she's listening or not, but
Yeah.
that's where I've seen the most of them.
Yeah.
Gary, where can we watch this presentation again if we want to look at it one more time?
Excellent question. I'm going to post it up on that the website. So the carriesnature.org. So I'm just going to continue to add resources to that web page. So so look for that, and I will send it out in an email to everyone who signed up, just so everybody has the link.
Sorry, I'm here. I was just struggling with the figuring out how to unmute quickly. But yes, I do have a lot of sightings here next to the park.